probably the main rule called Gall's law, and I really love it, says that a complex system can only be built by improving a simple system, not from the ground up. And the biggest mistake I see is founders trying to recreate very complex systems.
Hey everyone, welcome to Bright and Early, the podcast for people building early stage startups. I'm your host, Brian Ray. I talk to entrepreneurs, product people, designers, and marketing pros about their experiences during the early days to help you feel just a little less crazy. My guest today is Jane Portman. Jane is a UI UX consultant in web application design. She's the host of the UI Breakfast podcast and co-founder of UserList, which is a behavior-based email automation tool for SaaS companies. Jane, welcome to the show.
Hey, Brian, thank you so much for having me. I'm thrilled.
I'm super thrilled to have you. So people who are probably already listening to your show know that I was on it a couple of months ago, and that was just such a thrill for me because I've been following you and your work for years now. So it's such a thrill to get to talk to you again.
Yeah, I hope we link to the episode in the show notes because the conversation was just spectacular. You were an amazing guest. Thank you.
Well, thanks. I enjoyed it. Hey, so Jane, I want to talk to you about UI design in the early stages. You've got a ton of expertise to share. I also want to talk to you about UserList, the product, the SaaS tool that you're working on right now in its early stages. Would love to hear how all of that's going and get your thoughts there. But first, question I want to ask you is, what is your favorite podcast that you're listening to right now?
You know, my answer would be, unfortunately, I don't get to listen to many podcasts these days. I don't really commute and I don't do too much cardio, so there's no good reason. And luckily we delegated cooking and cleaning, so there's not that's not much reason to podcast at all.
Yeah, that's so fun. That's really funny about working remote, when you don't have a commute, which is, that's when I load up on podcasts, is either if I'm in the car or at the gym. So as you say, like, you've got a good bundle of those. You've got the convenience to not have to listen to podcasts to kill away the time, right?
Absolutely. But yeah, there's so much great material out there. Really, I'm feeling like I'm missing out, but maybe in the next life or something.
Sure. Yeah. Well, listen, I would love to hear. You've done so much interesting stuff over the years with a couple of books that you've written and shared. You've got your consulting practice. What are you working on these days?
Great question. So I wear a lot of hats, and I've really tried to reduce the number of hats lately. And right now, my dominant position is the co-founder of UserList, UserList.io, that is. It's an automation tool, as you mentioned. So we are working on that, and that's been an exciting journey, almost maybe a year and a half, I think, by now.
Okay.
In addition to that, I still do consulting, but just not as much, and I run a podcast. So these are probably three major things these days. And I've been doing a lot of content production over the last 5 years or so, but that's kind of quieted down now that I've worked towards my authority, and now my authority is working towards me. However, like, podcast production still takes time, but I used to do like webinars. I have published 4 books about design. That's been going great, but I'm thankful that now I'm getting to work on a serious software product with great co-founders.
Yeah. So I want to ask about your co-founders and how you're all sharing roles and get into that. I would love to hear a little bit about how is the transition from consulting and content production, it sounds like, into building a software product. I'm sure that many of the people listening to this show uh, me in particular also find themselves in that position of trying to make that transition. So how has that gone for you, and what are some lessons you've learned?
So I've been dreaming of running a product for a while, and I think I did a few attempts, and this is a serious attempt number 2. So this is my second take on SaaS. My first product was nice and small, and I was a solo founder, and I paid for development. I actually hired Benedict to build it.
Okay. Is this Tiny Reminder?
Yes, exactly. Okay. So it's a small utility that allows you to collect like documents and other things through a questionnaire. And it was small and nice, and I kind of tested the waters. And ultimately, I sold it off and was immediately like up for starting something else. That's when I recruited the remaining 2 co-founders to start UserList.
Cool.
So with
do you regret selling Tiny Reminder and wish that you had continued to dig in on it, or was it the right move and now you're transitioning to this other thing that you can go much deeper in on?
I'm absolutely thrilled that I can get to work on UserList.
Okay.
Because I made all the possible mistakes with Tiny Reminder, and some of them were fundamental and quite hard to fix. So one of them was not having a clear target audience.
Okay.
Another one was not having like a clear use case. It was too versatile. It had too many options to be used, and it was a vitamin, not a painkiller, if you know what I'm talking about. So It really, there were so many alternatives, and it was so easy to live without it, while UserList is an essential business tool. And even though the onboarding is a pain, and it's definitely hard to get new customers, but those who do join, they become loyal and they just stay on it while they're in business, because the cost of switching is much higher there.
Okay. Great. Well, yeah. So let's talk about UserList then. Who are your co-founders, and how did you come to meet? What was the genesis for getting this thing going and committing your time and effort to it?
Yes, I'm thrilled about the people who got to be my co-founders. So it was the fall of 2017. And Tiny Reminder was still running in my hands, but I got that acquisition offer and was like so excited to start UserList that I already got the ball rolling. The first person I approached was Benedict, because I totally knew that I couldn't leverage, like with the money I had, I couldn't really just hire out such a complex technical product. So I got to have a technical co-founder at that time. So I approached Benedict, and we kind of got that vibe going together already, of working together well. And he hesitated a little bit, brainstormed it, and said, yeah, it's going to be fun. Let's do it. And another person who joined was Claire Salentrop, and she's our marketing expert. And she was previously director of marketing at Calendly, and she was a guest on my podcast. And she was like number 1 on my list of marketers I knew. So I was like, maybe I should just pitch my idea and see if I get lucky. And I was so lucky that she said yes, because at that point of her career, it was exactly what she wanted. A little SaaS to practice her marketing skills, not skills, but like top expertise, a little something of her own. And there we had like design figured out, development figured out. It was all the missing pieces of the puzzle together. So when we got together, we spent quite a bit of time laying out the groundwork, such as figuring out the shares. We signed a pretty long and formal agreement even before we incorporated, so that all the roles, all the like commitments are written down on paper. And it was hugely helpful, was great groundwork for incorporation. And it was also great to feel somewhat safe about our commitments. We had that vesting schedule that allowed us to account for different kind of life situations, because situations always arise.
Yeah. So did you use Stripe Atlas or some out of the box thing for getting all of that formal reliable paperwork in place, or how did you all go about that?
We have a blog post about it.
Oh, great.
Because we span across 3 countries. So I'm based in Russia.
Yep.
Benedict is based in Germany, and Claire is in the US. And we're lucky to have a US co-founder. However, it's still not a silver bullet for international founders.
Okay.
Particularly Russia is somewhat not very favorable for banks and stuff. So we couldn't really use Stripe Atlases, fortunately. So we went with hiring a lawyer, getting everything done in a custom way. I mean, it was a pretty straightforward like shareholder agreement, but the research that we had to do to figure out that setup was pretty extensive. But it's definitely worth it because not only we feel secure, but we also feel confident as a business having, business credential, the business address, and everything else. I didn't have any of that for Tiny Reminder.
Hey everyone, it's Brian, and we'll get back to the interview in just a bit, but I wanted to let you know that Bright and Early is brought to you by Techstars Studio. Techstars Studio enables you to rapidly envision, validate, and launch disruptive new startups. Partner with the Techstars Worldwide Network to access entrepreneurial talent and a proven track record of helping the most promising startups succeed. For more information, visit techstars.com/studio. And if you decide to reach out, let them know Brian sent you.
Okay, that's great. I'll link to that in the show notes. That's a post on Userlist's blog somewhere?
Yep.
Okay.
I can send a link.
Okay. So you've got the groundwork in place. Everyone feels good about responsibilities, and you've even got a legal agreement, which is much more than I think many people can say that early on. How did you go about establishing what the MVP would be, and what's the product development process going to look like, and who's in charge of product and prioritization decisions?
Yeah, that's a great question. And it's always a challenge for everyone building a product because as a UX person, as a design person, mocking up new features is like a few hours of my time, like a few days max, literally, just because I kind of know how to use my hammer, right?
Yep.
So it's really not too long to design. However, implementation is a whole different story. It's I don't know, weeks, months of development time, polishing, and everything else. So we decided to really strip down the features. However, it was still lovable and doing the key function that it was supposed to perform.
Mm-hmm.
Like I seriously support the concept of minimum lovable product as opposed to minimum viable product. I just can't allow myself and ourselves to ship something really ugly or half working, especially in such sensitive industry where part of that is facing our customers, which is really serious.
Yeah, I heard you say that. I was going to ask you to talk more about that the minimum lovable product. So how do you, I would love to hear your thoughts on this, because one of your entire approaches with UI audit and just hearing you speak about other things is, and you even mentioned it there, is simplicity and stripped down, and coupled with making something really, really fantastic and great, especially if you're going to be representing your customers to their customers. How do you get over what seems to be the inevitable hump of it's not quite perfect yet, we can't ship it yet, it's not ready? How do you balance that in your own eye?
Yeah, so we do take a time to polish things. However, we do really focus on smaller subset of features. That's our recipe, how we can ship something faster.
Yeah.
So the recipe here is to say, like, we just don't have customization. We don't have like broadcasts entirely. Well, we do have broadcasts now, but we just like cut off half of the app and ship the other half, literally. But that other half was good. we would love to have filters. Well, there is no filters in place, but the list itself is nice, well designed, and looks good, even though it's pretty simple. Well, and I really need to mention that the whole approach to user list from day one was to build a simple, well, simple is not a great word, but a pragmatic, focused tool. Like you mentioned that with the feature audit, your goal was to dramatically underdo Google Analytics.
Yes.
So I just love the way you put it. Our goal was to dramatically underdo existing email automation tools because they're so bloated and hard to use. So we wanted to build a simple version. So we built a simple version of a simple version, and it was really bare bones, but nonetheless pretty in terms of visual style.
Okay. And so in terms of the design, though, how important is it, do you think, for maybe not for yourself because it comes so naturally, it's very easy, but thinking about some early stage SaaS founders who may not have a design background and they're hiring out or at least outsourcing some design and development, is pixel perfect design and execution a worthy goal in the run up to launch day?
Of course not. There is a load of amazing products who were not so pretty from day one, and the majority of my consulting clients are like that. So they made it to market pretty successfully with, somewhat half-baked design version, design themselves or customize the theme or something. And when they validated their product, then they have resources and time to upgrade their UI, UX. Mm-hmm. However, it really depends on who the founders are. Like if the founder is a designer, then it's a little bit more interesting because I really can't allow myself to ship some things apart because my clients will judge me for that.
Yeah.
One of the facets of that experience.
Yes.
And, however, if the founder is a developer and the product is deeply technical, why not? And there are so many ways you can approach it. However, probably the main rule, and it's called Gall's law, and I really love it, says that a complex system can only be built by making a simple system, by improving a simple system, not from the ground up. And the biggest mistake I see is founders trying to recreate very complex systems, like all kinds of bells and whistles from day one. And our approach is to build something super simple and then build up on it later. Of course, with I do have design experience. I know that I should probably leave that corner empty because that's where filters are going to go, et cetera, and kind of build with that extensibility in mind. But there is no problem redesigning certain things entirely down the road as soon as you have the simple thing working.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. It seems like playing into your strengths is the context that matters there. You have yourself on staff, and so design is a strength of user list from day one. Would you think it's fair to say if a company is founded by a developer and a marketer, then they're probably going to have fantastic functionality and great content, but maybe the design is not best in class?
It really depends. If they have saved up money for hiring a designer, it might as well look good. I should mention there are some frameworks these days. I'm talking about, let's say, Bullet Train by Andrew Culver, when they're really, really streamlining everything to look good from day one. All the basic functionality, it's already baked in and it's looking good. And they have a lot of components. And it's not a UI kit, but it's like a app groundwork. So I've seen a few startups that are using Bullet Train and they're looking good already, even though they invested I'm sure not so much time into their design because it looks like their boilerplate template.
Right. Yeah. So I haven't seen Bullet Train. I want to take a look at that. I was going to ask you, what are your thoughts on these UI kits that you see all over the place, and they have, every component you can imagine and 27 screens that you can download in Sketch. What are your thoughts on those?
It's amazing that they're available anyways, because these are like hundreds and hundreds of design work. However, if I were to use one as a developer, I would definitely pick something that's already implemented in code. So I would rather recommend like UI library or a theme that's already live that you can use, because the gap between Sketch or Figma layout and a real life thing, it's enormous. It's it's another.
It never looks the same in the browser.
Indeed. So I would really think towards themes and things that are really live, and there's plenty of those. So there is great a way to start without any design help at all.
Yeah, and it seems like as the years have gone on, the ability to have at least very good, not great, but at least very good, and certainly not terrible UI and good design in the early stages becoming easier because of these things. Have you ever seen Airbnb's like original site that they launched with?
Now that you're talking about it, I should probably investigate. I really feel to see it.
It's kind of crazy because now, I mean, Airbnb is like this paragon of design, and their founders are incredible, and they put out all these amazing, design resources. And the design that they launched with, granted, this is like, not sure what year it is, but probably still, some tables and layout, kind of an era. But it's really, really bad. Like, it's ugly and it's awful. But what they did was to at least ship something, and found that they had a market.
Absolutely. I'm by no means saying that design can determine the success of the product. Product market fit is way more important. However, design can be your competitive benefit, that's for sure.
Yes.
Competitive advantage. Well, that again depends on how you approach the problem that you decided to solve.
Yeah.
It's always nice. It's very indirect, but to me, and I know to other people, design communicates quality and trust, and those things are very important in the business ecosystem.
Yeah, and you nailed it right there. Quality and trust, and it does feel like that bar it gets raised, each year that goes on as internet companies, as the industry matures. It does seem like you're hitting on it there, that maybe if Airbnb were to launch today with that terrible design, like, no, there's no way I'm staying on that person's on that person's couch on that website design. No chance.
Especially, it really depends on the industry. For example, if you launch a banking app, you'd better make it polished, because people will really feel scared to
trusting their money.
Absolutely. And therefore, I don't know, health industry, anything else like that, it's worth extra polish for that very reason.
Yeah. So if I had, hypothetically speaking here, if I were trying to launch a brand new SaaS product and I had zero budget to invest in design, how would you recommend that I spend my time thinking about design?
Well, I would still recommend that you come up with $50 for a theme.
Okay. All right. So lemonade stand to get $50. Okay. I'll at least get there. Go ahead.
Oh, I don't know. They're probably more affordable ones, but seriously.
Yeah.
And maybe if you have designer friends, they could spend a few hours helping you pick the right theme that they think is good and high quality. Or if they don't have a design friend, maybe something with a large amount of positive reviews can cut the deal.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So thanks for that. So now let's say that my lemonade stand went really, really well. And now I've got a budget of $10,000 in the very early stages, these early days, to invest in UI design. How would you recommend that I spend that budget?
It really depends. Once again, I would get a very expensive designer do little work for me. and maybe stick to the same theme again, but ask that designer to customize it for you, make recommendations. And I would really invest into having a great marketing website. That's essential, because that eye candy, it's even more important on the front end of things when you're trying to capture visitors' interest with attractive website.
Okay, so you're saying, so we start with a super cheap theme that looks nice. We got some trust, and there's some quality there, but it's not custom to us. And then the next step from that, you would recommend a very expensive, experienced designer do a small amount of work, as opposed to a mid-level designer doing a decent amount of work.
The thing is, yes, absolutely. The thing is that an experienced designer can do something really good with a very small amount of time. However, if you hire someone less experienced, it might work out great, but you're also risking that you're going to spend like 3 months wandering in different directions and still not come with the right direction. While for a seasoned professional, it would be like, let's get down to that. I'm not sure, that might mean different things for your business. It might be customizing a theme. It might be like what I do. Typically, I lay out a few key screens for the person if they're on a tight budget. Maybe some branding and styling. It also is part of that work.
Yeah. Okay.
But it's really dangerous to go with low class designers, because you're gonna spend the same money, waste a few months, and still not get the desired outcome. That's really bad.
Yeah. Okay. So work with a high quality designer to get a screen or two, like important screens, you're saying, and then those UI patterns, you'll probably be able to apply them in a number of places and just get a lot more quality for your buck.
Yeah, hopefully so.
Yeah. Awesome. Hey, you, so I mentioned it earlier, you've got part of your consulting services is what you call a UI audit. And so you say, in this UI audit, I'll take a fresh professional look at your web app and determine critical design flaws. So what are some of the most critical design flaws that you see most often? What can an early stage founder who may not have a deep background in design, or a design-oriented co-founder, what are those critical flaws that they might be able to keep an eye out for?
Yes, I do have some, indeed. So probably my favorite one is dashboards, because people are trying to cram all the functionality in their app into a dashboard, and all the things are like all the workspaces and all the functionality appears on one crammed screen, which is custom designed from scratch by a non-designer, which doesn't typically work great. So the idea is that dashboards are only important for apps that are mission critical if they run smooth. I don't know. If you're controlling something, hosting, to see that things are going well. For example, with user list, we are planning on a dashboard because one of the things for our customers is having peace of mind that their automations are indeed running.
Yes.
So dashboard is not in our MVP. It's not there yet, but when we have more time this year, we're definitely going to build something in that direction. However, people don't go to our dashboard to compose messages or make new campaigns. And that leads us to a second most popular improvement that I introduce is restructuring the navigation so that it makes more sense and is just overall more understandable for the user. And the approach I advocate for in my book is to write down all the things that you're working with in your app, because let's just be honest. Most of the business apps are lists of different things. So write down the objects, the types of objects that you're going to be managing, and work from there. So a navigation should represent a place for these objects to live in, like super normal, a reliable way to find them at any time. And that's just not always true in apps that were designed by non-designer, let's say.
Yeah. Is there I'm thinking about like card sorting maybe. to determine that the organization of the navigation? Are there exercises that you have found to be helpful in taking this big list of objects and then organizing them in a way that does make sense to the audience? Do you have a preferred technique?
I don't have any preferred techniques because card sorting might do well for a brand new app or for, I don't know, a government website when you have dozens of different things.
Right.
What I typically use that is somewhat regular business apps that they know what they're doing pretty well. It's just that some things are confusing. So my goal is to come in and find those confusing things and fix them.
Yeah.
So it's not like overdoing things from day one.
Yeah.
However, on my podcast, we've been talking a bit with Andrew Mayfield, the founder of tools that just do just that. So you might head over there.
Oh, yes.
And
right, I'll put it in the show notes.
The design sprint technique might also be hugely useful if you want to get the app up and running with a prototype very fast.
Mm-hmm.
We'll also have an episode on that, but there is design sprint book and sprint book and a lot of resources on that.
Great. Yeah. Thanks so much for that. Okay, Jane, we're about out of time here, but one final thing I wanted to ask you about, and speaking from personal experience, working on startups can make you feel a little nuts if you don't actively, work on maintaining some sanity and calmness. Are there any practices that you have found helpful for yourself that you would like to share?
You mean for organizing the working process to feel at peace?
Yes. So everything from practical, pragmatic, functional, how do you do your to-do list, all the way to mindfulness, meditation, taking a walk, having a hobby. What do you do that you find helps you to maintain some level of sanity?
Oh, great. So I don't get to meditate much because I have 3 children and I work from home. And thankfully, I do have a babysitter because otherwise it would all not be possible. And the younger one is 6 months now. So it's fun.
How cute.
I guess I find pleasure in flexibility. So, and my combination is flexibility and focus. So I'm not always sure when I'm going to get those working hours, but when I do, there is something on top of the mind, on top of the list that I'm going to be working on, and my inbox takes care of the rest of the time.
Okay, I like that flexibility, focus when you're working, and a babysitter. Okay, all right, there you go, audience. My guest today has been Jane Portman. Jane, thank you so much for your time, for everything that you shared, and hope to talk again soon.
My pleasure. Hope this podcast is a blast.
I hope that you enjoyed that conversation as much as I did. So just a few closing thoughts here. I wish I would have dug in on it a little bit more. I liked that bit when Jane mentioned how with tiny reminders, she came to the conclusion that it was a vitamin and not a painkiller. And I really like that mental model, that way of thinking. And so I found this article, I'll link to it in the show notes, that talks about products being a candy, a vitamin, or a painkiller. I would love to hear what you all think about that. The other thing that I loved was Jane talking about Gall's Law. And this is something else I'll definitely link to. Josh Kaufman, who wrote The Personal MBA, is a really great book. It just puts all these business concepts into very plain language and plain explanation. It's just like the whole book is just a bunch of, one-page chapters. And one of them is on Gall's Law. And so I'll just state it again. Gall's Law says that all complex systems that work evolved from simpler systems that worked. And if you want to build a complex system that works, build a simple system first, and then improve it over time. And I think that is just extremely, extremely fascinating and super important. Jane mentioned it. It's the quote that the soundbite I opened up the episode with. the mistake that she often sees founders make is trying to create a complex system. And I see the exact same thing. I think we all do, in many different capacities. And perhaps if you can be honest with yourself and you're trying to build something brand new, go from something to nothing, then you probably recognize this in yourself. Oh, we need to add this thing. It should, you're on a particular screen. Oh, you know what? It should do X. And that is how complexity happens too soon. And so I loved that. I would love to hear what you think about that as well. And finally, I really enjoyed the piece of the conversation about UI kits and the role of design in the early stages and how quality and trust are communicated by good design. And I think my thinking is evolving on this particular topic. Because as time goes on, as the web continues to mature, the expectation of good design, or at least non-bad design, that expectation continues to go up. And I think, we can still see that Craigslist does not have a beautiful UI, and Airbnb, as I mentioned, began from a garbage design. I would love to hear from you all. What's your take on this? Do you think that or maybe you have examples even, a brand new concept that has a market, as Airbnb did, a brand new concept that launches with terrible design, not no design, not like here's a landing page, click on this and we'll measure demand from it. I mean, the launched first version was objectively terrible, and yet the company managed to get enough trust and interest from customers such that they have gone on to get some traction and become some measure of successful. But let me know what you think. I want to hear from you. I am on Twitter at bray. That is B as in bear, R as in raccoon, H as in horse, E as in, let's say, elk, and A, need another mammal, aardvark. bray on Twitter. I would love to hear from you. If you have other thoughts on how I can make this podcast better for you, listener, are there topics that you want to hear about? Are there guests you think I should reach out to? Please let me know. Thanks, everybody, for tuning in. Listen, if you dig this show and you want to hear more, then please head on over to Apple Podcasts or Google Play and leave a review. It really is the best way to help other people find the show, which is great for my guests, which is great for the show, which then makes it easier to attract more guests. You see where this is going. So if you're listening and you think other folks should be, please leave a review. And if not for me, then do it for the extremely cool group of people who've agreed to be the first guests on my show, knowing that it's brand new with very little to offer them. Jane Portman, Claire Solentraub, Gia Lottie, Margaret Kelsey, Janelle Allen, Andrea Hill, and by the time you hear this, plenty more. These are all really busy people who already have an audience of their own, and were so gracious to me when I said, hey, I'm launching a brand new podcast with no listeners, and here's what it's about. Are you game? And they said yes. So if not for me, do it for them. Leave a review, tell a friend, spread the word. And until next time, I'm Brian Ray.